stories there. We'll be recording this event for posterity so that people can come back and watch using the same link. We're very lucky to have our father's friends and colleagues as guest speakers today, and fortunate to be able to celebrate en masse at this time in history where people are often forced to face the rites of passage of life alone. My father would be truly touched to know that so many of you are here to share in the celebration of his amazing life, and he'd dig the fact that we're using communication technology to bring his world closer together. He'd also tell us not to make too big of a fuss and to get back to what we were doing before too long. I also know that we're 30 minutes into the first half of a Bama game, so with that in mind, I leave you with a Roll Tide and hand the reins over to Art Rainey, who is the master of ceremonies for this event.
Thanks so much, Todd. I had the great privilege of being Dr. Bryant's student at the University of Alabama in the mid-1990s. He was always Dr. Bryant to me, even when he insisted that I call him Jennings. It took me a good while to get used to that. For 25 years, he was my mentor, my research collaborator, my writing coach, my career advisor, my parenting counselor, my sounding board, my cheerleader, and by a stroke of great fortune, my dear friend. At the outset of this event, I want to again express our collective and deepest condolences to Phyllis, Allison, Todd, Adrian, Stacy, and Angie, to his sons-in-law, Paul and Chris, his sisters, Mimi and Sarah, his brother-in-law, Reed, and of course, his grandchildren, who is so clearly adored above all else. Sarah Beth, Bennett, Garrett, Jason, Samantha, Isabella, Gabrielle, and to countless aunts and uncles, cousins, nieces, nephews, I sincerely hope that the brightness of Jennings' life and legacy will comfort you and help guide you through these dark days. For those of you who are viewing this event live, and for those of you who will view it later, please consider dropping a note in the comment section here on the YouTube page. Maybe let the family know where you're watching from or how you knew or knew of Dr. Bryant. Perhaps leave your own favorite memory or maybe leave a note of encouragement. I'm sure they would appreciate it. Adding your voice to this tribute will make it all the more special. You know, it's a great honor to be a part of the celebration of Jennings' life, a man who, as much as anything, seemed to celebrate the lives of everyone else around him. His positivity, his generosity, his kindness, and his patience, especially with students like me, made you, the recipient, feel like you were the person of the hour, the center of attention, the superstar. And in those moments to him, I truly believe that you were. In a world in which so many people see everyone else as an enemy and as a means to an end, Jennings saw friends and neighbors. He saw opportunities for connection, real, authentic connections. Over the next hour or so, you're going to hear from several of those with whom Jennings formed deep connections. Mine started in the fall of 1993. I had one semester left in Southwestern Seminary, and I was trying to figure out my life's next step. Like Jennings, I had a lot of interest. I was considering doctoral work in religion and philosophy and ethics, and communication was really kind of a wild card. Now, this was the pre-internet world, mind you. I don't really remember how I learned that Jennings had a background in theology as well, but I did. I was back home in Tuscaloosa visiting my parents. It was probably the week of Thanksgiving. And out of the blue, I gave him a call. And in typical JB fashion, he invited me to meet him the next day in his office in Reese Pfeiffer Hall. Now, I'd be lying if I told you I remembered what was said. My best guess is that I yammered on about seminary stuff that had little to do with him, what he was doing, or what the PhD program had to offer. But I do remember that he listened, seemingly without judgment, and he nodded. I remember his smile and a firm handshake at the end of the conversation, a handshake that would, in due time, turn into welcoming and gloriously reassuring hugs. Working closely with him for the next 4 years, I'm not exaggerating when I say that Jennings Bryant helped shape the course of my life. And it all started because he said yes to a meeting with a naive kid on the other end of the phone that he didn't know. Because as busy as he was, and he was always busy, he took the time, he made the time to talk to me, just like he did when I had trouble landing my first job, when I was considering leaving the academy altogether, when my son was struggling socially at school, when my father-in-law died, and when my own father died. He was always there to listen, to support, to encourage, and to share the burden. This is what I think I'll miss the most. Many of you may know that Jennings completed his own doctoral studies at Indiana University with his longtime mentor, colleague, and friend, Dr. Dolph Zillman. Over the years, a loose connection of sorts seemed to form between IU and Alabama. Allison Bryant served on the faculty at IU. I taught there as well. And Alabama hired several IU graduates over the years, including Dr. Shawad Joe. Shawad joined Jennings as a faculty member in the Department of Telecommunication and Film in 2000. When Jennings retired, Shawad took his place as Associate Dean of Graduate Studies. Shawad is currently the Leonard H. Goldenson Endowed Chair in Radio and Television in the School of Journalism at the University of Missouri. Shawad, please share with us some memories of your time with Jennings.
Thank you, Art. That's a very touching story. Well, if you know a legend, and the legend gave you his swan song, how are you supposed to feel? Fortunate, ecstatic, jumping up and down on a couch? I experienced none of that, only sadness, a great void. Jennings is a legend. A couple of months ago, I asked him for an academic dialogue for Communication and Society. It's a unique column of the journal featuring academic leaders, their thinking, and philosophy. Jennings allowed me to pick his brain. I got a print copy of the article the night before his death. I was about to share that with him as he only saw the Gallup proofs. Then Allison broke the sad news. The dialogue was the second time I tried formally to celebrate Jennings' illustrious career as a scholar and researcher. Many of you remember that we organized 2 panels roasting Jennings at the ICA annual conference in Boston in 2011. Both the current dialogue and the ICA panels center on 2 themes: empowering media and empowering people, because that is what Jennings did to perfection. What made Jennings an even rarer legend is that he did not sit atop Mount Everest. He touched each of our lives in a very personal way. He empowered, he inspired, he made you feel life is really good. I consider myself truly lucky when I got a job in Alabama because I could get close and personal with my role model in scholarly rigor, in gentleness of character, and in impeccable integrity. He was the first one to send a congratulatory note when I got an offer. When I returned from my sabbatical in Singapore, he quietly put a welcome back gift at my door. He called Sarah when my son was enrolled in a gifted program just to clarify transportation details. Just imagine what it's like to be treated like family by a legend. I wrote in the dialogue that graduate students often wonder how a rock star can also be so approachable, down to earth, and full of humility. We could always joke with Jennings, and he did the same. In the Boston Rose, I enumerated many of his academic accomplishments and openly questioned whether he had a life, to which he, Sarah, and Allison nodded enthusiastically. When I finished my first marathon, he quipped, "Is this symptomatic of midlife crisis?" We share many good moments. My family went to visit his North Carolina farm after his retirement. One section of the road was so winding that my GPS did not know what to do. It kept saying, recalculating. He and I had a good laugh each time we reminisced. Jennings is a legend who had a big heart for diverse people. His answer to my above rock star question has now been reposted thousands of times on overseas and Chinese social media. Ever since I and his many global mentees shared his said passing. He said, being a teacher at a research university is an incredible gift and honor because you are constantly coming into contact with ambitious, personable, incredibly gifted individuals. If you are too so on yourself, if you are always trying to stroke your own ego, you miss so many rare opportunities to learn from those who surround you. Each of us has things to teach others. He truly believed that. I took him to Beijing after the 2002 ICA conference in Seoul, where he was installed as ICA president. You should see his fascination with people and culture. Jennings, I hope you already knew how utterly and shamelessly grateful I am to you for the endless ways you have enriched my life. Now that you are gone, we have to recalculate, but I hope you will always guide us with your GPS from above. I know I speak for multitudes in saying, thank you, love you, and rest in peace.
Thanks so much, Shua. In 2018, Jennings was welcomed into the Communication Hall of Fame, an honor bestowed on a select few who have brought prominence to the state of Alabama through the practice of and professions associated with communication. With his induction, Jennings joined the ranks of luminaries such as Helen Keller, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Supreme Court Justice Hugo Black, and novelist Harper Lee. It was a fitting cap to an outstanding career of service at the university and in academia. For the ceremony, the Alabama Center for Public Television and Radio produced a biographical video of Jennings. For those of you who may not be familiar with his professional accomplishments, here's a look. Many thanks to the College of Communication and Information Sciences, especially Dean Mark Nelson, for allowing us to share this with you.
Jennings's work has literally shaped the field of media effects research.
The cascading effect of his impact is, I don't know how you'd even begin to measure it.
He's the leading researcher in the world on children in media, having spent many years studying with and helping to shape some of the most important television programs that children have seen around the world.
I was one of these people that tried on so many different careers. Even as a child, I saw myself doing lots of different things. I saw myself being a physician. I saw myself being an attorney. I saw myself being a social worker. So I tried on a lot of different things in my mind. One of the things that I pursued from the very beginning was, whatever I do, I'm going to have some opportunity to teach.
Jennings has a unique ability to communicate, right? It's no surprise that he is in the field that he's in.
Many of the important questions in communication hadn't been asked, much less answered. And so that drove me into the area of communication.
Time that he spent with a children's television workshop, which is now Sesame Workshop, working on Sesame Street.
I was so fortunate early in my career, when I was still a doctoral student, to get adopted by the Sesame Street family. I was brought in to create new methodologies to test the effectiveness of every Sesame Street and every electric company segment. Initially, people had been looking at what's the effects of television on children. Well, we changed that very quickly to how do children learn from television? How do they process information? And so we sort of changed the formula for the media and children environment.
Part of Jennings' mentorship, at least for me, expanded beyond the laboratory, beyond the classroom, to his own farm.
He had Thanksgiving dinners. He offered places for grad students to stay that needed like a place in between when housing was open or during moving times on campus.
We had a couple here yesterday who had spent the day with me just sitting on the front porch rocking and talking about their times where we came up to the farm, and I would pay them to help me cut brush or to do weed eating or to mow, and they thoroughly enjoyed it. We had some students that spent the bulk of the summer up here while we were working on a research project.
Ostensibly to talk about research. What we ended up doing, though, is doing a lot of bush hogging and weed eating of the property that he has there, which was a tremendous amount of fun.
We would work together and we would do research together, then we would hike together, and then we would swim in mountain streams or go to lakes. And it was a grand experience of bonding, and certainly it built the kind of relationships that have lasted throughout the years by having that kind of experience.
It was after a long day of weed eating that we then pour ourselves a small glass of homemade lemonade, sat out on the front porch, and that's when the ideas really began to blossom.
My best writing was always done here. My best thinking was always done here. Rocking chairs were my best podium and the best place for generating ideas.
Those moments are the ones that I cherish more than any when I think about the time that I spent with Jennings.
I just think that more than anything, Dr. Bryant made us all feel like part of an extended family.
There are very few people, in the course of one's career that you can really say, I love working with this person, and Jennings is certainly that for me. I feel blessed.
I think it's almost difficult to put into words the impact that he has made.
He always seems poised and looking for an opportunity to pour into somebody else.
Consider him at the top of a family tree that just has roots planted across the world and across the globe, because he has had such a tremendous impact on the study of communication.
I really think that communication is the heart of what we bring as humans into the situation that makes us different from other animals.
The freedom that he gave us to learn, to be better researchers, to be better thinkers, to be better instructors, were really a hallmark of his leadership and mentoring style.
When everything is said and done, I'll see very large and dramatic ways that I was emulating him that didn't even realize it at the time, because he had affected me so deeply. And so, I'm not sure I've even begun to understand some of the ways that his mentoring has affected me.
To me, the harmony that existed between the faculty and the student and the administration, the staff at the University of Alabama was extremely rare. To have that kind of blessing where everything came together and supported everything I wanted to do, what more could one ask? It was a wonderful environment. It was home.
Tremendous and impactful career he had. If you have the means, please consider extending Jennings' legacy with a donation to the Jennings Bryant Memorial Endowed Program Fund at the University of Alabama's College of Communication and Information Sciences. In keeping with his own life's work, the fund will provide scholarships for graduate students from diverse backgrounds and will support the college's ongoing research efforts. Dr. Kim Bissell is spearheading some of those important efforts even now. She's a faculty member in the Department of Journalism and was a colleague of Jennings in the College of Communication and Information Sciences from 2000 until his retirement. Of particular importance to me personally, Dr. Bissell is also the director of the Institute for Communication and Information Research, a position held by Jennings for 25 years, from which he impacted the lives of countless students and clients through the meaningful and socially important studies highlighted in the video. A legacy that lives on now through Kim's own work. Jennings was a mentor and a tremendous friend to Kim and her daughters, both in Tuscaloosa and so often during their visits to the farm. Dr. Kim Bissell.
I would like to thank Allison, Todd, Adrian, and Phyllis for giving me the opportunity to share a few thoughts about Jennings. It's truly an honor to be able to do so, and I'm most grateful for this opportunity. As I was trying to think of adjectives or phrases to describe Jennings, these three words kept coming to mind: joyful, genuine, and gracious. While there are so many other words or attributes that could be used, as I've reflected in my interactions with Jennings, it seemed that these were the most appropriate descriptors. I first met Jennings when I was interviewing for the job that I have now at the University of Alabama. When I saw that I had a meeting scheduled with him, I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit nervous about meeting this icon and giant in our field. Some of my previous encounters with other icons in the field had not been particularly pleasant. As I walked into his office on the 4th floor of Reese Pfeiffer, in the office that I now have, he greeted me with a big smile, the one that you saw every time you met him or passed him in the hallway. Within 1 minute, he had me laughing. Within 5 minutes, he had created a climate that was calming. And at that point, my anxiety and nervousness went away. By the end of the conversation, and I don't think we talked too much about research, if I'm being perfectly honest, I had learned so much about the things that brought him joy, his family especially. And in so many conversations that I had with him later, I was always reminded of how joyful he was. I remember saying to him right as I was walking out that door in the total amateur hour, things not to say during an interview kind of way, "You are so nice. You're Jennings Bryant, and you are so nice." And he said to me, "I'm just a man. There's no other way to be." I walked out of his office thinking, if I'm offered this job, I'm taking it. Because if I can have Jennings Bryant down the hallway, I'd be the luckiest person around. And I certainly was. I had so many conversations with Jennings in his office or passing him in the hallway, and he was always smiling, always joyful, always exuding a sense of grace and gratitude for what he considered his blessings, his family, and the work that he was doing in research and teaching. I was fortunate enough to have gotten an invitation to visit Jennings at the farmhouse in Marion. And when we pulled up for that first visit, he pointed out to my younger daughter, Emma, the swing that she could use and the grass that she could play on. Shortly thereafter, he asked her if she wanted to go on a tractor ride. She, of course, was incredibly excited about that. As they pulled away on the tractor, my first thought was, my daughter is going off on a tractor ride with Jennings Bryant. And my second thought was, why am I not going off on a tractor ride with Jennings Bryant? Over the course of the years, I had the opportunity to visit so many more times. And as I pulled up into the farmhouse, Jennings would often be coming in from working on the farm. So we had these deep conversations, often on the porch, and here he was sitting in overalls or work clothes. There were no pretenses in any of the conversations. He was clearly sincere and genuine in the advice that he shared and in the guidance he provided. And as I look back during these years when I was trying to navigate the crazy world of academia, it's his words and advice that I remember the most. He didn't sugarcoat it, and he didn't paint a rose-colored picture for me. He gave it to me straight. But in doing so, he was sharing that pathway to success. He genuinely cared about me as he cared about so many PhD students he supervised. And as I've heard so many others say in the last week, he believed in me in a time when I didn't quite believe in myself. His genuine care and interest in me provided me the confidence I needed as I was stepping into the very big shoes that he had left as the director of the ICIR. As all of you know, Jennings was an ordained minister, and I'm the daughter of a minister. And having Jennings as my friend was like having my dad here, when my dad was actually more than 1,000 miles away. I've always thought of Jennings as my academic dad, but in truth, he was so much more than that. It was in conversations we had on the front porch with a glass of homemade lemonade, or the talks that we had walking around the farm, that I truly got to see his graciousness. Isaiah 40:31 says, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." I went to Jennings on more than one occasion when I was not quite sure I could walk and not be faint, and he enveloped me in kindness and grace and with his very big heart. Jennings was indeed an icon and a giant in the field of mass communication and media effects, and his words will guide so many others in the years that follow. But beyond his intelligence, foresight, ability to multitask, and do so in mismatched shoes, I have seen this. His heart, his smile, his laughter, and his way of bringing a sense of calm to whatever meeting or defense he was sitting in was something that always stood out to me. After joining the University of Alabama and totally taking advantage of the fact that Jennings was just a hallway away, I had the good fortune, if you want to call it that, of sitting in faculty meetings where Jennings was in attendance. If I'm being honest, I'm not totally sure he was a big fan of those. But there we would sit, sometimes on opposite sides of the room, and he would look over at me and just smile with his big smile. And in that exchange, I knew I wasn't walking down the path alone, whether it was suffering through the faculty meeting or walking through my own journey, professionally and personally. He was always lifting me up. I feel like I've learned how to be a better human, having had the chance to be in so many different situations with him. And for that, I'm a much better person. I am truly blessed to have had him in my life. Thank you again to Allison, Todd, Adrian, and Phyllis for giving me this opportunity to share a few words about our dear friend Jennings.
Thanks so much, Kim. Such wonderful memories. As Kim alluded to, right, Jennings was seminary trained. One hint of this fact could be found in his writings. Ever so often, he would drop a word or a phrase in Latin. It always made me smile. My favorite was the way that he would often sign off of emails to me with the Latin word for peace, pax. Jennings was a person of faith. He had faith in humanity and faith in science. Faith that tomorrow would be a better day. Faith that the tractor would start this time. Faith in a higher power that binds us all together. Few knew this better than Dr. Charlie Durham. Dr. Durham became the pastor of the church the Bryants attended, First Presbyterian Church of Tuscaloosa, in 1989 until his retirement 25 years later. Over the years, he remained close to Jennings and the family, on the farm, in Davidson, and through many significant events in their lives. Dr. Durham, would you please share a few words?
Be honored to do so. Thank you, Art. I'm wearing a robe, not because it's cool here in Alabama, in Tuscaloosa, but because it was something that tied me and the Bryant family together. Jennings and Sarah were faithful members of the Presbyterian Church here in Tuscaloosa, along with Adrian and Todd and Allison. Allison was the first of the Bryants we met when she befriended my 14-year-old daughter when we first moved to Tuscaloosa in Thanksgiving of 1989, where she knew no one. Allison showed up at our doorstep and said, "I'm Kristen's new best friend. I'd like to meet her." And that began a lifelong friendship there too. The robe, as many of you know, in the Presbyterian tradition, is not a liturgical garment. It's not an alb or a vestment or so on. It's an academic robe. Presbyterians believe in an educated clergy. We try to hide that sometimes, but an educated clergy nonetheless. One of our main doctrine is service of God with the life of the mind. Jennings certainly embodied that. He breezed through Davidson College and then followed his calling to Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary, a seminary that I might add just recently bestowed upon him the Distinguished Alumni Award, an award they rarely give out, and even then only to tall steeple preachers. But Jennings served the Presbyterian Church for a few years while Sarah was getting her advanced degree. And then that calling led him to the field of communication, where it was always eating at him, I'm sure. But like Mr. Rogers, I guess, he He was one of these Presbyterian ministers that couldn't help staying away from television, from shaping television. I'll always be thankful for the University of Alabama keeping him in Tuscaloosa. I know there were many occasions, one of which I knew in particular, when other universities like Syracuse were trying to woo him away, or when the administration in Washington was trying to give him positions, or once again, public television. But Jennings felt the ability at Alabama to do research based on values, what he believed in. Well, he didn't want to just see how television reacted to people. He wanted to see how television could shape and mold the values he held near and dear. But he also had another calling, and that was to be a pastor to pastors. I was one of those blessed to have him not just sitting in the pew every Sunday there on the main aisle, along with Sarah and Bob and Babs McCurley right beside him, but he also was one who every church he was in, he would be that kind of encourager and pastor to them. Whether it was at our church, First Presbyterian, where he was served as an elder and as the chair of the personnel committee at a very important time in our church's life, whether it was at DCPC, Davidson College Presbyterian Church, or at the Marian Church, where he was elected an elder there too and clerk of session. I have a favorite biblical character by the name of Barnabas. And in the Acts of the Apostle, Barnabas takes on this crazy new convert by the name of Saul, who used to persecute the church, the early Christians. Barnabas was the only one with courage enough to hang in there with him. And so in Acts, you hear Barnabas and Saul, Barnabas and Saul, then Saul and Barnabas, then Paul and Barnabas, and then Paul. Scripture calls Barnabas the son of encouragement. Jennings, as you're hearing, was our Barnabas, that son of encouragement. He was constantly mentoring his pastors. He was encouraging us, and he was urging us forward. And it was the Apostle Paul that wrote to when he was mentoring a young Timothy, and he wrote these words, "I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. From now on, there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give me on that day. And not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing." That was Jennings, always the one finding us to mentor. And that hospitality, I too made it to the farm, sat on that porch. What the others were not willing to say is that lemonade had something else in it from Russia, a nice vodka. I wore this robe also, I'm reminded, at Sarah's funeral and also at Allison's wedding. What a family. Anytime you talk to Jennings, even if it was after a few months' time, he would always bring up his children. Allison, he would say, "I can't begin to comprehend the kind of math that she does in her research." Not sure I believe that, but that's what he said. And of Todd, he said, "What he's doing with computers is absolutely impossible." And when he began teaching at the university, Jennings could only smile, and tears in his eyes. And Adrian, who put aside her own dancing to choreograph world-class artists and bring them together in troops or in events. And well, she organized today too. This father was always the Barnabas, encouraging each and every one of his children. St. Augustine once wrote in his Confessions, "Thou hast made us for thyself, O Lord, so that our hearts are restless till they find their rest in thee." There was not just an academic restlessness in Jennings. There was a personal restlessness. There's always a desire to press on, to move forward. Phyllis joined him in that journey, and maybe more than she bargained for, moving to Davidson, building a new home and settling in there, only to be uprooted and to return to the mountains, to that upward call there. And Phyllis was his constant companion back and forth to doctors and to hospitals, and was there all the way to the end. We are so thankful for her witness and her love. I'm told that Jennings' ashes, in part, have been interred at the beautiful English garden that he nurtured there on the farm. A third of them will go to the graveside of Sarah, and a third also go with Phyllis and her family. It is an upward call, and Philippians is the last letter that Paul supposedly wrote, and it was to the church he loved the most. It's like writing to a family, and he wrote these words: "Not that I have already obtained this, the resurrection of the dead, or am already perfect, but I press on to make it my own because Christ Jesus made me his own. Brethren, I do not consider that I have made it my own, forgetting what lies behind and straining towards what lies ahead. I press on towards the goal of the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus." The upward call of God in Christ Jesus. But also when I think of Jennings, like him, I think of a joyful man, jovial, probably, always a joke, always an amazing insight into things. He lifted our spirits and made us feel 1,000 feet tall. And so Paul in that last letter wrote these words: "Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. Let all know your forbearance. The Lord is at hand. Don't worry about anything, but in everything, with prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known. And the peace of God, which passes all understanding, will keep your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus our Lord." Joy. That's what he was. He lived it. He inspired it and all around him. And then there are these words that follow right after that, that could be Jennings' word too. Paul, back before the Gospels were written, was willing to set himself up as an example to follow. Jennings never would say that, but that's what he did, didn't he? And so these words: "Finally, beloved, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Keep on doing the things that you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, and the God of peace will be with you." Thanks be to God for the gift of Jennings Bryant. Well done, good and faithful servant.
Thanks so much, Dr. Durham, for those touching words. Well done indeed. Another person of faith is Dr. Wes Fondren. Like Jennings, he too completed a seminary degree before starting his PhD. Wes is another former student of Jennings and a longtime mentee. He teaches at Coastal Carolina University as professor of communication theory, research, and methods, and served there as department chair. He lives with his 4 children now in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, which is exactly 4 hours and 37 minutes from the Bryant's front porch. Wes?
Thanks, Dr. Rainey. Well, I'm just going to tell a quick story. I knew I was going to be going last, and so I figured you guys would have heard a lot already. And so I'll tell this one quick story, and I just want to couch it in a few truths about Jennings. One of them is he may be the most productive person that I have ever worked with. It was astounding to me how productive he was. And I had worked with a few productive people before and found them to be less than gracious if everyone else wasn't productive. And so it was a huge surprise to me when I discovered how unbelievably gracious and generous he was, even in being so productive. That's the story I want to tell you. And I would love to tell you a story about some amazing thing that I had done and how he was gracious and helped me do it, but I'd really rather tell you about a mistake I made. When it came time for me to finish my dissertation, I missed the deadline for spring graduation. And Jennings was very gracious about it and said, well, we all leave in, the second week of May. And so you missed the deadline. And so I went ahead and applied for August to take care of my dissertation. And he called me up and said, let me see if I can get everyone else. If I can get them all, let's try to do the first Monday in June. And I said, I thought you guys were all gone. He said, yeah, we'll all, I'll take care of it. And he did. He took care of it. So 8 o'clock in the morning, the first Monday in June, I defended my dissertation. And after it was over, it lasted about 3 hours. And after it was over, it was lunchtime. And of course, I was all emotional and stuff. And I asked him, I said, can I take you to lunch? He chaired my dissertation. Can I take you to lunch? And he said, I'd love to, my main man, but I got to get back to North Carolina. I got to help somebody with something in the morning. My first thought was, well, that's really great. He's here helping me in my dissertation, and then he's going to go and leave immediately and drive 6.5 hours to help somebody else. Then my second thought was, he said, get back to North Carolina. And I said, Dr. Bryant, how long have you been in Tuscaloosa? And he said, I left yesterday after church. I left North Carolina yesterday after church. And I realized, because of my mistake, he spent 13.5 hours in the car just coming down so I could defend my dissertation. This is what I mean by being gracious and helping other people be productive. Now, he pushed people for sure, but he did it in a very gracious way. But the word that I want to point out is how unbelievably generous he was with his time, with his mind. And if you're a student of his, you know what I mean by that. He was so generous with his mind. He was generous with his name. I saw students, and I did too, I saw students at conference that would spend his name like currency. They would go around just telling people, hey, yeah, I'm a student of Jennings Bryant's. And I don't know how many, maybe hundreds of hours he spent just when I knew him writing letters of reference for people. And he told me one time that he wrote every one of them fresh, that he always wrote them from scratch. He was unbelievably generous and gracious, even in his being so productive. And so I wanted to do something for him. He had been so incredibly generous, spending 13 hours in the car just to help cover my mistake. So I went to buy him a Hawaiian shirt. So a lot of you guys know he loved to wear Hawaiian shirts. And so I went to the shirt shop in downtown Tuscaloosa because I knew that they had those. And I went in and started shopping for them. And the guy came and asked me, what design I wanted. And I told him I'd like something crimson if I could. And so we talked about it for a minute or two. And I picked out one. And he said, let me go see if I can find one in large because you look like you're about a medium or a large. And I said, oh, it's not for me. And actually, I don't know what size I need. I'm going to have to look at them. And he said, oh, who's it for? And I said, well, I've got this professor who was incredibly gracious to me and very generous and did something really, really nice for me at Alabama. And I want to buy him a Hawaiian shirt. And he said, you're going to need a double XL. And I laughed. I thought he was joking. And I said, no, seriously, I don't know what size I'm going to need to look at him. And he said, I know who you're talking about. He said, when you said generous and gracious and a Hawaiian shirt, I knew you meant Jennings Bryant. I read a book one time when I was 17 that changed my life. And there was a sentence in it that said, make the goal of your life that everyone who is a part of it is better because you were a part of it. I remember thinking, leaving the shirt shop that day, I want to live the kind of life that even a salesman at a shirt shop recognizes my character as gracious and generous. Even that's not the end of the story. A couple of years later, I was on that front porch up there in North Carolina. I'd come to spend the weekend with him. And he told me he wanted to take me into town. And so we went into town, and it was it's a small town with cute little quaint shops. And we're walking in one of the stores, and I said, are you looking for something? He said, yeah, I'm looking for a shirt. I'm like, oh, okay. And so I helped him look at shirts and stuff. And when we got one picked out, it was this one. He wanted to buy me a shirt. He was very generous. He was generous with his time. He was generous with his heart. He was generous in lots of ways. And I honestly never thought he could be more productive. And when he retired, I saw his activity explode in a way that I never thought I could imagine the day that he discovered the like button in Facebook. Everybody I knew that had any connection to him, he had beat me to the story and liked it and commented. And it was astounding how well he kept up with people and stayed connected. One time, I think he may have liked something before I actually got it posted. I don't know how he did it, but he would have been the person to figure it out. But it was a reminder to me of just how connected and how generous he was with his words and with his time and with keeping up with people. He was a very generous person. Very, very generous. And I can't think of a better way to honor him with generosity. And I hope a lot of us, I hope a lot of people are willing to be generous and donate to his fund. He was a very, very great mentor, a loving friend, and I'm going to miss him dearly. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Wes. Those are fantastic memories. Jennings Bryant was a superstar in the field of communication, both in academic and professional circles. He was a celebrated teacher and writer and editor, a valued colleague, mentor, and leader. But he was also a trusted and caring neighbor, a community member, congregant, citizen, board member, volunteer. And he was a beloved husband and father, brother, uncle, and son. He was curious and funny and warm and long-suffering, well, at least usually. He was gentle and gracious and giving. And he was so sweet. He was good-natured, and he was infinitely kind. You know, people often talk about the family that you're born into and the family that you choose, your friends. Both are incredibly important in our lives. But we don't often acknowledge another family, and that's the one that chooses you. Jennings Bryant approached the world both figuratively and quite often literally, with arms wide open. If you let it, his gravitational pull would draw you into his orbit, and there you would meet his true family. Sarah, the kiddos, as he used to call them, and later Phyllis. All of them just as loving and lovely and kind as he. And he shared them. He was so proud. And you too became part of the family. And so now, those of us in the family Jennings chose, his extended family, we wrap our arms around you, Phyllis, and Allie, and Todd, and Adrian, and all the rest. Your husband, your father, your gentleman farmer inspired so many. We proudly carry the family banner with you, and we will continue to celebrate his life, a life well lived, filled with smiles and laughs and hugs and love and hope. On behalf of the Bryant family, both real and extended, I thank you for joining us. I encourage you to stick around for a loving flip through the Bryant photo album. Take care, be well, and Pax, peace be with you.